Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into something that, well, it causes a lot of anxiety for parents,
Yeah,
raising kids with two languages.
it really does.
I mean, if you're doing this, you've definitely heard the worries, right? Like, will my child get confused? Are
Yeah.
they going to be delayed? Am I just making things harder for them?
Yeah, and that anxiety is understandable because, for a long time, the myths were stronger than the science, really.
Yeah.
But what we're doing today is a deep dive into the very latest research. We're talking neuroscience, psychology, linguistics findings from like 2023, 2024
Right.
that give us a much clearer picture of the real effects, cognitive, biological, social, beyond those old fears.
So our mission here is really to give you, the listener, some confidence based on what the science actually shows now.
Exactly.
We've gathered sources on everything from how tiny infants process language to how the brain structure physically adapts, right up to long-term cognitive health.
And we'll be looking at both kinds of bilingualism simultaneous, so from birth versus sequential, where the second language comes a bit later.
Okay, so let's start with the biggest elephant in the room, the confusion myth. This idea that hearing two languages just scrambles a baby's brain.
Right, the mental chaos idea.
Yeah. What does the science say about those really early stages? Can babies actually handle it?
Oh, absolutely. The evidence is, frankly, overwhelming now, and it happens incredibly early.
How early are we talking?
Research consistently shows that by about 18 to 20 months, infants hearing two languages simultaneously already know the difference. They get that, say, dog in English and chien in French are separate labels for the same thing.
So they're not mixing them up conceptually.
No, they understand these belong to distinct systems. They know they have two words for one concept, which is actually quite sophisticated.
That implies they're actively managing these two systems, even that young. That sounds like hard work mentally.
It is, and we can actually measure that effort. There were these fascinating studies using eye tracking and pupil dilation.
Okay, pupil dilation tracks cognitive effort, right?
Exactly. So, with 20-month-old French-English bilinguals, when researchers unexpectedly switched languages mid-sentence, like started in French and threw in an English word,
What happened?
the infants showed a brief processing cost. Their pupils dilated slightly, their reaction time slowed just a tiny bit.
Ah, so their brain had to work a little harder for a moment.
Yes, but here's the crucial part. They noticed the switch, and they handled it. They adjusted.
So it wasn't confusion, it was management.
Precisely. They showed a level of language control that's remarkably similar to what adult bilinguals do. It's not something they learn later, it kicks in almost immediately.
Okay, that leads us straight into code switching then. You know, when a child says something like, Mama, quiero leche and cookies, parents often see that as proof of confusion.
Or laziness, that's the other one. Like, they can't be bothered to find the right word.
Right. What's really going on there?
Well, linguists see code mixing as completely normal, healthy, and usually temporary. It's not a sign of a disorder at all.
So why do they do it?
Often it's about gap filling. They grab the word that comes to mind fastest or the one they actually know, regardless of the language. It's about communicating effectively right now.
So it's actually efficient, resourceful.
Exactly. It's using all the linguistic tools available. And typically, as their vocabulary in both languages gets stronger and more balanced, this mixing naturally decreases.
And they get better at knowing when to use which language, too.
Definitely. By age 2, many bilingual kids can already selectively use one language over the other, depending on who they're talking to. They know mom understands Spanish, but maybe dad only speaks English.
That context sensitivity is really interesting. There was a recent study, right, from Montreal 2024, looked at how families actually manage input.
Yes, 300 bilingual families.
Yeah.
And it challenged that old, rigid, one parent, one language, or OPL rule.
So parents don't need to be super strict about OPL for it to work.
It seems not. The study found families were generally much more flexible. The key factor wasn't rigid separation, but rather the overall amount and, well, the quality of language exposure.
Okay, and wasn't there a surprising finding about who provided the most impactful input?
Yes, this was really striking. The mother's individual language use seemed to have about double the impact on the child's language input compared to the father's.
Double. Why would that be?
The researchers suggested it likely comes down to practical things, like maybe mothers, on average in that sample, spent more direct one-on-one time with the child.
Okay.
But the implication for you as a parent is pretty significant. It suggests that consistent, rich exposure, especially from the primary caregiver, might be more important than strictly separating who speaks what. Flexibility seems okay.
It probably takes a lot of pressure off parents trying to follow strict rules. Okay, so if the brain handles dual input so well early on, what about developmental timing? The other big fear, delays. Speech delays,
Yeah.
learning delays.
Yeah, that's a persistent one, but again, the research is very clear here that fear is largely unfounded.
So they hit milestones on time.
Pretty much identically to monolingual kids. Babbling, first words around 12 months, starting to combine words between 18 and 24 months. The major milestones happen on a very similar schedule.
But what about vocabulary size? That's something people often point to, saying bilingual kids know fewer words.
Right, and that can trip people up. If you only measure their vocabulary in one of their languages, yes, it might look smaller.
Because it's split across two languages.
Exactly. But if you count their total conceptual vocabulary, meaning you count dog and sheen as knowing the concept dog, then their overall vocabulary size and learning rate are right on par with monolingual kids, sometimes even larger. They just have two labels for many concepts.
Makes sense. So assuming the learning engine is running at the same speed, how much input in each language do they need to become truly proficient? Is there a threshold?
There seems to be. Research suggests that if a child gets around 60% or more of their daily language input in one specific language,
Okay. Then by age 3 or 4, their skill in that language is likely to be comparable to a monolingual child's. So volume and consistency really matter for reaching high proficiency. Okay, let's peek under the hood now. This is where it gets really fascinating. How does managing two languages actually change the brain structure? Are there physical differences?
absolutely. We've known for a while from earlier studies, say around 2020, that bilinguals tend to have more robust white matter connections and might lose less gray matter with age.
Right, suggesting positive effects.
But the newer research, especially from large MRI studies in 2024, paints a more nuanced picture. It's not just more is better.
Okay, tell me about that big 2024 MRI study on 9 and 10-year-olds. It found something that sounds a bit weird. Lower white matter integrity in bilingual kids. What does that mean?
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive. White matter integrity, often measured by something called FA, basically reflects how organized and, let's say, finalized the brain's communication pathways are. High FA usually means well-myelinated, efficient tracks.
The lower FA sounds...
Yeah, not in this context, apparently. The interpretation wasn't a deficit. It was something called protracted development.
Protracted development, meaning slower.
Not slower in a bad way. Think of it like this. The monolingual brain might pave its highways early and efficiently for one language. The bilingual brain, because it's constantly managing two systems, keeps those language and cognitive control pathways, well, more like they're under construction for longer, more adaptable.
Ah, so it stays more flexible, more plastic for a longer period.
That seems to be the idea. Delaying the final paving might allow for more optimization and potentially better, more flexible connections later on.
So it's a different developmental trajectory, not a deficient one.
Exactly. And we see other structural adaptations too. A late 2023 study found volume differences in deep brain areas crucial for language switching and control.
Like where?
Specifically, they found a smaller cerebellum but larger volumes in parts of the basal ganglia, the putamen, thalamus, globus pallidus. These areas are heavily involved in managing tasks, controlling impulses, selecting actions.
Like selecting the right language.
Precisely. The brain is physically adapting its control centers to handle the job.
So looking at the whole brain network, what's the big picture?
It points towards efficiency. Another 2024 neuroimaging study reported that bilingual individuals tend to show higher global efficiency in their brain connectivity. Their brains might be better networked overall.
Better networked. And does it matter when you start?
It seems to. That same study found that the earlier the bilingual exposure began, the more simultaneous it was, the greater that network efficiency tended to be later on. Early start seems to optimize the wiring.
This constant mental juggling, this switching, it leads us right to the cognitive benefits, doesn't it? The idea of natural brain training.
That's a perfect way to put it. Constantly having to select one language and inhibit the other, even unconsciously, is like doing cognitive push-ups all day long.
And this has measurable effects.
Oh, yes. A huge meta-analysis in 2023 looking at almost 150 studies concluded pretty definitively that bilingual kids tend to outperform monolinguals on tasks measuring executive functions, especially things like inhibitory control, ignoring distractions, and task switching.
So they're better at focus and mental flexibility. And there's newer evidence on impulse control, too.
Yeah, a 2024 experiment with 7 to 12-year-olds confirmed better impulse control and faster switching. But maybe even more interesting is the impact on social skills.
How so?
Bilingual kids often show enhanced social cognition, particularly perspective taking.
That makes intuitive sense.
Yeah,
Because they constantly have to figure out who speaks what.
right. Exactly. Does this person understand my Spanish or do I need to use English? That daily mental exercise forces them to recognize that other people have different knowledge, different perspectives than their own.
It's basically built-in theory of mind practice.
It really is. And that constant practice likely boosts empathy and social flexibility.
And beyond the cognitive mechanics, there are huge social and cultural pluses too, aren't there?
Absolutely. Maintaining a heritage language is vital for identity, for connecting with grandparents, for keeping cultural traditions alive.
It builds bridges.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it fosters adaptability. Kids comfortable in two cultures often develop incredible resilience. Some also become language brokers for their families.
Translating for parents,
Mhm.
navigating appointments.
Right. Which can be challenging, but it often fosters maturity, responsibility, and a unique kind of empathy.
Okay, let's bring this towards the end game. We've talked about early acquisition. How critical is that timing? What's the difference between learning as a child versus an adult?
Timing seems crucial for how the languages get wired into the brain. If a child gets significant exposure before, say, age 7 to 10, that rough critical window, they have a very high chance of achieving native-like fluency, grammar, even pronunciation in both languages. They essentially integrate both into the same core neural networks, like having two first languages.
Whereas if I try to learn Spanish now as an adult,
Well, you can definitely become fluent, but you'll likely rely more on explicit learning, memorizing rules, vocabulary lists. You'll probably keep your native accent.
and brain scans would look different.
Yes, late bilinguals often show more activation in frontal executive control areas when using their second language. It takes more conscious effort, neurologically speaking. The L2 is often built on top of the L1 system rather than integrated within it from the start.
So for parents who manage to give their kids this early start, what are the real long-lasting benefits? What's the payoff down the line?
The advantages seem to compound over a lifetime. Perhaps the most compelling is the evidence around cognitive reserve.
Cognitive research.
Yes. Lifelong bilinguals, on average, tend to show symptoms of dementia and Alzheimer's disease significantly later, sometimes years later, than comparable monolinguals.
Wow. So the bilingualism actually protects the brain against aging.
It seems to build resilience. That constant mental workout strengthens the brain's networks, making it better able to cope with age-related decline or damage. It's like an insurance policy for brain health.
A lifelong brain fitness program, basically.
You could say that. Plus, bilinguals often develop better metalinguistic awareness and understanding of how language itself works.
Which probably makes it easier to learn a third language or a fourth.
Often, yes.
Huh.
And of course, in our globalized world, being bilingual offers clear academic and career advantages. It fosters cultural agility.
So, summing up, the fear of confusion or delays. It's really not supported by the current science.
Not at all. There's just no significant lasting cognitive downside to early bilingualism. Any tiny temporary lags in vocabulary in one language are just dwarfed by the substantial lifelong benefits for the brain and for social skills.
The takeaway then, if you're a parent considering this or in the middle of it, seems pretty clear.
It really is. Don't agonize over potentially messing them up. Exposure to both languages is one of the best cognitive gifts you can offer.
That's a powerful closing message.
And maybe one final thought for you to consider. When you hear your child switch languages mid-sentence, maybe saying "chien" instead of "dog," try not to see it as a struggle or a mix-up. See it as.
See that tiny mental act, that split-second decision as an investment. It's a microdeposit into their cognitive reserve. That constant, almost invisible background task of managing two systems is actively building brain resilience that could pay dividends decades from now, well into their old age. It's pretty amazing, really.